Long before the Ashanti Empire rose to fame, before the golden crowns and sacred stools, there was a time of division and hardship among the Akan-speaking peoples in the dense forests of what is today Ghana. Small clans and tribes lived scattered across the land, each ruled by its own chief, bound by old customs, but separated by rivalry and fear. The forest was both home and battlefield. Rivers ran deep, and the trees whispered ancient secrets. Among these tribes were the ancestors of the Ashanti, who yearned for unity but had no leader to bind them. The land was rich in gold, a gift from the earth that attracted many eyes, but its power was hidden beneath layers of ancient tradition and spiritual reverence. In the early 1600s, the powerful Denkyira kingdom dominated much of the region. They demanded tributes of gold and slaves, enforcing their will with fear and fire. Many smaller tribes, including the ancestors of the Ashanti, lived under their shadow, sending gold and kola nuts as a price for peace. The Denkyira king's armies patrolled the trade routes, crushing any who dared resist. But in the small village of Kumasi, a child was born who would change the course of history. Osei Tutu, son of a noble family forced into exile by Denkyira's expanding power, grew up hearing stories of lost glory and dreams of freedom. His early life was marked by hardship and learning, but his spirit burned bright with the desire to unite his people. From a young age, Osei Tutu showed signs of wisdom beyond his years. His keen mind and courage made him a natural leader, even as tensions between clans simmered and rivalries threatened to pull them apart. Yet he was not alone in his vision. Across the land lived a man of mystery and power, Kamfo Anakai, a priest believed to commune with the spirits. His voice was said to call storms and silence enemies. His knowledge of the spiritual realm was unmatched. Together, Osei Tutu and Kamfo Anakai dreamed of more than survival. They dreamed of an empire built on unity, strength, and sacred tradition. Their vision was not merely political but deeply spiritual, rooted in the belief that the Ashanti people were chosen by the gods to rise as one. Yet, this dream faced countless obstacles. Rival clans suspicious of each other, powerful enemies watching closely, and the weight of history pressing down like the thick forest canopy. The Denkyira king would not give up his dominance easily, and the path to freedom would be paved with blood and sacrifice. But the ancestors were watching, guided by the spirits, and fueled by the sacred connection to the land and its golden roots. Osei Tutu and Kamfo Anakai prepared to unite the people and claim their destiny. The golden roots of a mighty empire were about to take hold, promising a future where the Ashanti would not just survive, but thrive. The sun rose over Kumasi like a blazing promise as Osei Tutu, now a young man grown into the weight of destiny, gathered the fragmented Akan clans beneath the sprawling limbs of the great Saba tree. The air was thick with anticipation and the scent of burning incense, for this meeting was unlike any before. It was a turning point, a chance to forge what centuries of rivalry had kept apart. Across the land, chiefs arrived cautiously. The Bekwe, the Adansi, the Kokafu, and others had all suffered under the yoke of Denkyira's rule. They bore scars of battle and heavy hearts laden with distrust. Yet here they were, drawn by whispers of change and the magnetic leadership of Osei Tutu, supported by the enigmatic priest Kamfo Anakai. Kamfo Anakai stepped forward, his white robes flowing, eyes gleaming with divine fire. He spoke of ancestors and gods, of a bond that transcended blood feuds and petty disputes. Then, from within the folds of his robe, he produced an object that stole the breath from every listener. The golden stool, Sika Dwa Kofi. The stool was unlike any throne, crafted not to be sat upon but to hold the soul of the Ashanti people itself. It gleamed with a radiance that seemed to pulse with life. According to legend, it had descended from the heavens during a sacred ritual performed by Kamfo Anakai himself, a symbol that the Ashanti nation was bound by a spiritual covenant that no sword could sever. One by one, the chiefs approached the stool, each dipping a finger into the blood of a sacrificed ram and pressing it onto the golden surface. This was their oath, a sacred pact to unite as one people, to stand against tyranny, and to protect the spiritual heart of their land. Osei Tutu, humbled by the gravity of the moment, bowed before the stool and then raised his head to declare his vow. We are one people, bound by spirit and blood. The golden stool is our soul. Our unity is our strength. Together, we shall rise. This sacred moment marked the birth of the Ashanti Empire. But the path ahead was fraught with danger. The Denkyra king would not surrender his dominance quietly, and war was inevitable. The golden stool was not just a symbol. It was a rallying cry, a beacon for warriors who would fight fiercely for their freedom. As the drums of war echoed through the forest, the Ashanti prepared to face their destiny, not just with swords and shields, but with the spirit of an empire reborn. The forest whispered with tension as the Ashanti Confederacy, united under the sacred golden stool, prepared to confront their greatest adversary, the Denkyra kingdom. For decades, Denkyra had ruled the region with an iron fist, extracting gold and slaves from tributary states, including the Ashanti clans. But now, a new force had risen, fueled by unity and a vision of independence. Osei Tutu and Kamfo Anakai worked tirelessly to organize the Ashanti warriors. They trained relentlessly, blending traditional battle tactics with new strategies inspired by their experiences during exile. Kamfo Anakai's spiritual guidance was as crucial as any weapon. He invoked ancestral spirits to bless the warriors, calming their fears and stoking their courage. The Ashanti army was unlike any before it, disciplined, fierce, and united by a cause greater than land or wealth. Their shields bore the emblem of the golden stool, reminding each soldier of their sacred duty. The drums of war thundered day and night, calling warriors from every corner of the Confederacy. The first major clash took place at Phias in 1701. The Denkyra forces, confident in their superiority, advanced boldly into Ashanti territory. But the Ashanti were ready. Using knowledge of the terrain, ambush tactics, and their unwavering spirit, they surrounded and overwhelmed the Denkyra army. The defeat was crushing for Denkyra. Their king fled, and many chiefs were captured or killed. The Ashanti victory at Phias marked the end of Denkyra dominance and the beginning of Ashanti supremacy in the region. With their enemies defeated, the Ashanti Confederacy expanded rapidly. They integrated smaller clans and towns into their union, offering protection and shared prosperity in exchange for loyalty to the Golden Stool. Osei Tutu became the first Ashanti, the king of the Ashanti, ruling not just by might but by spiritual authority linked directly to the sacred stool. Kamfo Anakai remained his closest advisor, ensuring that the empire remained connected to the gods and ancestors. The Ashanti Empire's rise was a powerful testament to the strength of unity, faith, and the indomitable will of a people determined to claim their destiny. With the Denkyra defeated and the Ashanti Confederacy firmly established, the new empire began to flourish both materially and spiritually. The fertile lands around Kumasi provided abundant crops, while the nearby rivers and forests offered resources vital to the people's survival and prosperity. Central to the Ashanti identity was gold, not merely as wealth, but as a sacred symbol. The Ashanti revered gold as the spiritual gold, a connection to their ancestors and the divine. The golden stool itself was fashioned from pure gold and symbolized the unity and soul of the nation. Trade expanded rapidly. The Ashanti controlled key trade routes that connected the interior of West Africa to the coastal ports. They exported gold, kola nuts, and slaves while importing firearms, cloth, and other goods from European merchants. Despite their growing power and wealth, the Ashanti remained deeply committed to their traditions. Rituals and ceremonies were held regularly to honor the ancestors and seek their guidance. The Ashanti believed that their strength came not just from armies or riches, but from maintaining harmony with the spiritual world. The king, or Ashanti, was both a political and spiritual leader. Osei Tutu's successors upheld the legacy of balancing power with piety. Royal courts were centers of culture, law, and religion, where advisors, priests, and warriors gathered to ensure the empire's stability. However, the Ashanti Empire's rise also attracted attention and envy from European colonial powers. The British, Dutch, and others were increasingly interested in controlling the gold-rich territories and trade routes. These external pressures would soon test the empire's resilience and force it into difficult conflicts that challenged its sovereignty and spiritual foundations. As the Ashanti Empire expanded its influence, the British Empire was simultaneously strengthening its foothold along the West African coast. The coastal forts and trading posts established by the British were gateways to the interior, and control over the lucrative gold trade became a growing point of contention. The Ashanti saw the British not just as traders, but as threats to their sovereignty and spiritual heritage. The British, focused on economic gain and colonial expansion, often disregarded the complex cultural and political structures that bound the Ashanti people together. Diplomatic relations were strained by misunderstandings and conflicting interests. The British imposed trade regulations that undermined Ashanti control over resources. They sought to install friendly chiefs and interfere in Ashanti politics, actions viewed by the Ashanti as direct assaults on their independence. These tensions led to a series of confrontations known as the Anglo-Ashanti Wars, which spanned much of the 19th century. The Ashanti, renowned for their military prowess and strategic use of the jungle terrain, fiercely resisted British incursions. One notable conflict occurred in 1824, when Ashanti forces confronted a British expedition attempting to assert control over the coast. Despite suffering losses, the Ashanti demonstrated their resilience and tactical skill, forcing the British to reconsider their approach. Yet, the technological superiority of the British, including firearms and artillery, gradually tilted the balance of power. The Ashanti adapted by acquiring weapons through trade and manufacturing their own, but the struggle for dominance was far from over. The clash between the Ashanti and the British was more than a battle for territory. It was a collision of worldviews, one rooted in sacred tradition and unity, the other in imperial ambition and commerce. By the late 19th century, tensions between the Ashanti Empire and the British had reached a boiling point. The Ashanti fiercely protected their sovereignty, especially the sacred golden stool, the spiritual heart of their nation. For the Ashanti, the stool was more than a symbol. It embodied their collective soul and destiny. In 1896, British Governor Sir Frederick Hodgson made a grave error by demanding to sit on the golden stool, a demand considered sacrilegious and an outright insult. The Ashanti people saw this as an attack on their very identity. This disrespect ignited the War of the Golden Stool in 1900. With many Ashanti chiefs hesitant to confront the British, the fierce and determined Queen Mother, Yarisanawa, rose as a leader. Her courage and leadership became legendary. Yarisanawa rallied the Ashanti warriors in a desperate siege against the British fort in Kumasi. The conflict was intense and marked by brutal fighting. For months, Ashanti forces cut off supplies to the British garrison, demonstrating both their strategic prowess and unyielding spirit. Despite their bravery, the Ashanti were eventually overwhelmed by British reinforcements equipped with superior weaponry. Yarisanawa was captured and exiled, but her defiance became a symbol of resistance across Africa. Although the Ashanti Kingdom was officially annexed into the British Gold Coast colony, the Golden Stool was never captured. It remained hidden, preserved by loyal custodians who safeguarded the spirit and pride of the Ashanti people. The War of the Golden Stool marked a pivotal moment, a final stand for independence and cultural identity against colonial domination. Following the annexation of the Ashanti Empire by the British in the early 20th century, the Ashanti people faced the challenge of preserving their identity under foreign domination. Despite the loss of political autonomy, the cultural and spiritual life of the Ashanti endured with remarkable resilience. The British imposed indirect rule, co-opting some traditional leaders as intermediaries while suppressing resistance movements. However, the Ashanti maintained their customs, language, and religious practices in villages and towns. The golden stool remained a guarded secret, never relinquished to colonial authorities. It symbolized continuity and hope, a reminder that, though their political power was diminished, their soul was unbroken. Ashanti elders passed down stories of past glories, sacrifices, and the spiritual significance of their heritage. Secret societies and festivals kept ancient traditions alive, strengthening communal bonds. During this period, Ashanti youth began to access Western education through missionary schools, blending new ideas with deep-rooted pride. Many emerged as leaders in the later independence movement that swept across Africa. The Ashanti people's ability to adapt while honoring their past laid the foundation for future political and cultural revival, preserving the golden roots planted centuries earlier. By the mid-20th century, the call for independence echoed louder across Africa, and the Ashanti people were integral to Ghana's growing nationalist movement. Though once subjugated, their legacy of resistance and unity became a beacon of hope. The British Gold Coast colony saw the rise of political parties and leaders demanding self-rule. Ashanti intellectuals, educated in colonial schools but deeply proud of their heritage, played prominent roles in this struggle. They drew inspiration from ancestors like Osei Tutu and Yaa Asantewaa, whose courage and leadership became rallying symbols. Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana's first prime minister and president, envisioned a united nation that celebrated its diverse cultures, including the proud Ashanti. In 1957, Ghana became the first sub-Saharan African country to gain independence, ending centuries of colonial rule. For the Ashanti, independence was not just political, it was spiritual vindication. The golden stool was no longer a secret relic but a symbol embraced as part of the national identity. Though the Ashanti kingdom no longer ruled as it once did, its cultural significance remained profound. The empire's golden roots, nourished by centuries of struggle, unity, and faith, had blossomed into a new era of self-determination and pride. The Ashanti story was now woven into the fabric of a modern Ghana, carrying forward the legacy of a people whose spirit could not be broken. Post-independence, Ghana witnessed a remarkable cultural renaissance, with the Ashanti people playing a central role in preserving and celebrating their rich heritage. Despite political changes and modernization, Ashanti traditions, language, and customs remained vibrant. The golden stool continued to be revered, with ceremonies conducted to honor its spiritual significance. Festivals such as Akwasiti celebrated the ancestors, renewing the bond between the living and the spirits. Ashanti art, weaving, and goldsmithing flourished, drawing international recognition. The intricate Kent cloth and elaborate gold jewelry became symbols of identity and pride, showcasing centuries of craftsmanship. Educational institutions in Kumasi and beyond began incorporating Ashanti history into their curricula, ensuring younger generations understood their roots and responsibilities. Furthermore, the Ashanti monarchy, though symbolic within Ghana's republic, maintained a respected place in society. The Asantehene served as a cultural custodian, bridging past and present. Today, the Ashanti legacy is a testament to resilience and adaptation. A people who transformed conquest and colonization into sources of strength, preserving the golden roots that continue to inspire. Before the Ashanti Empire fully rose, there was a moment that defined its spirit, a blood oath, forged not in conquest, but in sacred brotherhood. In the thick forests of Kwame, beneath the shadow of sacred silk cotton trees, Osei Tutu summoned the chiefs of the scattered Akan states. His vision was not just of one kingdom, but of a union, bound not by force, but by sacred allegiance. With the spiritual guidance of Okomfo Anakai, a pact was made, not written with ink, but sealed with blood. Each chief pricked his finger, letting a single drop fall into a sacred basin carved of ancient ebony wood. They swore before the gods and ancestors to never raise arms against one another and to recognize Osei Tutu as the unifying Asantehene. Then, Okomfo Anakai called upon the heavens and summoned the golden stool from the skies, a stool that hovered in midair before gently landing in the lap of Osei Tutu. It was said to contain the soul of the Ashanti people, a living symbol of unity. That moment wasn't just spiritual, it was political brilliance. By centering the golden stool above the man, it meant no king was ever greater than the nation. No warlord could claim supremacy beyond the will of the people embodied in the stool. This sacred bond of the Asantman, the Ashanti Union, birthed an empire unlike any other in West Africa. The blood that was spilled wasn't of war, but of sacred unity. And from that moment, the Ashanti didn't just rule, they reigned with purpose. The Ashanti had found unity, but to defend it, they would need strength. And so, the warrior clans of the forest awakened. Osei Tutu, now the crowned Asantehene, ordered the creation of a standing army unlike anything the forest kingdoms had ever seen. It wasn't a collection of scattered militias. It was a disciplined force bound by oath, identity, and rhythm. At the heart of it all beat the golden drum. Then Tam Keys, the great oath, bound each warrior to the golden stool. The penalty for desertion was death. The reward for loyalty? Eternal honor. Clans contributed their bravest men to form elite regiments: Adantan, vanguard; Nifa, right wing; Benkum, left wing; Chidam, rear guard, each with its own leader, banner, and war chant. Before battle, the warriors gathered around the talking drums, listening as the drums echoed secret codes only the Ashanti could interpret. These weren't just war drums. They were instruments of command, morale, and fear. Weapons were forged from iron smelted deep in Ashanti mines. Swords curved like the crescent moon, axes balanced for quick throws, and spears carved with ancestral symbols. Their shields were etched with the totems of their clans: elephants, panthers, eagles. The Ashanti warriors didn't just fight, they performed war. They marched in patterned steps, shouted sacred war cries, and moved as one, like an ancient forest animal risen from the roots themselves. The Ashanti did not seek war, but they were prepared for it. Their enemies learned quickly. The unity of the Ashanti was not just in symbol, it was in blood, bone, and steel. The final test of Ashanti unity came not from within, but from the towering power that once held them in chains: Denkyira. Under King Tim Jakari, Denkyira had grown arrogant, bloated by tribute and past victories. When word reached him that the Ashanti had unified under the golden stool, he laughed. "They are nothing but a forest of mushrooms, tall in the rain, rotten in the sun," he scoffed. But Osei Tutu, now no mere chief but a Asantehene, did not laugh. He prepared. In 1699, the Ashanti marched, not as scattered clans, but as a nation. The golden drum led the way. The warrior regiments, honed and hungry, moved with military precision through the dense jungles toward Fiais, the heartland of Denkyira. The Denkyira had numbers, gold, and pride, but the Ashanti had something greater: a soul. They used terrain like an old friend. They set traps with thorn pits and hidden archers. The talking drums coordinated ambushes across the forest without a single word spoken. Guerrilla warfare mixed with divine fury. Then came the Battle of Fiais, a clash soaked in blood and destiny. Okomfo Anakai stood barefoot at the edge of the battlefield, chanting incantations, invoking spirits of thunder and flame. It is said he called down fog to blind the Denkyira and fire to scatter their horses. Whether myth or truth, the Ashanti broke Denkyira's lines. Tim Jakari was captured. Tradition tells us he was beheaded and his head paraded as proof. The tribute days were over. That day, the forest shook, not from defeat, but from the rise of an empire. The Ashanti were no longer a hopeful alliance. They were the rulers of the Gold Coast. With Denkyira vanquished, the Ashanti no longer walked in the shadow of another kingdom. They stood tall, draped in gold, crowned by blood. A new order swept across the forests and savannas of West Africa, one not born of invasion, but of vision. Osei Tutu, as the first Asantehene, declared Kumasi the capital. There, Beneath the sacred tree where the golden stool had descended, he built a palace not of marble or stone, but of divine purpose. Every brick sang of victory. Every corridor whispered oaths of unity. But ruling was harder than war. The Ashanti Empire became a federation. Each conquered state, Achaeum, Wassa, Bono, and even subdued Denkyra, was allowed to keep its chiefs, but now they answered to the golden stool. Rebellion was not crushed with brute force alone. It was smothered by rituals, diplomacy, and the fear of breaking the ancestors' will. Okomfo Anakai became more than a priest. He was a statesman. He established a constitution, unwritten but sacred, based on clan rights, the authority of the stool, and the protection of the weak. His magic was no longer just for war. It shaped policy. Trade exploded. The Ashanti, rich in gold, cola nuts, and slaves, forged ties with the Hausa traders from the north and Portuguese merchants from the coast. Kumasi grew loud with languages, busy with caravans, and alive with ceremony. Still, the echoes of war never faded. The golden stool was sacred, but power must always be defended. The Ashanti forged iron swords not just for show. They created a standing army, one of the best organized in Africa, ready to crush uprisings or foreign threats. And so, the Ashanti dream, once whispered in sacred groves, was now a roaring empire, brilliant, brutal, and unshakably proud. Years passed. Under Osei Tutu's rule, the Ashanti Empire flourished like a forest after rain, deep roots, wide branches. Gold flowed through the markets of Kumasi. Priests sang praises to the ancestors. The golden stool gleamed beneath thick layers of ceremonial dust. But no man escapes the march of time. In 1717, while leading a campaign against the Achaeum, Osei Tutu was struck by a musket ball while crossing the Pra River. Betrayed by an Achaeum spy who revealed a secret crossing path, the king was ambushed, not in battle, but in transition. The shot that killed him echoed not just through the valley, but through the hearts of his people. The news brought silence to Kumasi. The drums stopped. The sky felt lower. But Okomfo Anakai would not let the dream die. He declared that Osei Tutu's spirit had not been taken by death, but had entered the golden stool, becoming one with the very soul of the Ashanti people. A funeral unlike any seen before swept through the empire. Warriors shaved their heads. Chiefs walked barefoot. Women draped in red mourned under the ring. Entire villages fasted for days. And the golden stool, veiled in black cloth, sat in stillness. But this was not an ending. The stool did not stay empty for long. Osei Tutu's heir, Opoku Werai, stepped forward. Not just a warrior, but a builder, a thinker. He promised expansion, organization, and consolidation. And so began a new chapter. For the Ashanti, death was never the final drumbeat. It was the silence before the next rhythm. The death of a king became the birth of a legacy. From this pain, a stronger empire would rise, carried not by a man, but by the eternal soul of a people who refused to bow. With Osei Tutu's spirit now resting within the golden stool, and Opoku Werai at the helm, the Ashanti Empire did not mourn in stagnation. It marched forward with renewed purpose. Opoku Werai was not like his uncle. He was quieter, more reserved. Where Osei Tutu roared like a lion, Opoku moved like a leopard, patient, calculating, swift when needed. His first move was to honor the foundations laid before him. He reorganized the military, built roads connecting the farthest Ashanti provinces, and enforced a new system of taxation and tribute, making the empire feel not like a patchwork of conquests, but like a single, breathing body. Then came the wars. The Ashanti army, now a machine of precision and discipline, moved south and east. The Denkyra were humbled once more. The Achaeum, who had betrayed Osei Tutu, were crushed. One by one, kingdoms that had mocked or underestimated the Ashanti were either assimilated or reduced to tributaries. But Opoku Werai wasn't merely a conqueror. He invited scholars from the north, opened Ashanti borders to traders from the Sahel, built schools, marketplaces, and royal courts that glittered with golden frescoes and ancestral murals. Kumasi was transformed from a warrior's base into a cultural jewel of West Africa, often called the Garden City for its beauty and layout. Still, the empire remained guarded by war drums. In Ashanti hearts, pride and paranoia danced together. The golden stool, still never to be sat upon, was enshrined, worshipped, and protected with deadly seriousness. Touching it meant death. Stealing it meant total war. The empire grew heavy with both glory and burden. And yet, every child born under the Ashanti sky knew one thing. The soul of the nation was eternal. As long as the stool remained, so too would the memory of Osei Tutu. So too would the empire rise, fall, and rise again. Years passed. Generations came and went. But the legend of the Ashanti Empire, forged in defiance, guided by prophecy, and held together by gold and blood, endured. The golden stool, still untouched by any mortal body, sat guarded by the most elite warriors. The Ashanti considered it the very soul of their nation, and even in times of peace, its protection was a sacred duty. Festivals were held in its honor. Drums beat through the night to remind the people of their origins, how one man, with vision and courage, had brought together the scattered clans under one eternal symbol. But time, as always, brought change. European powers began encroaching, first as traders, then as missionaries, and finally, inevitably, as conquerors. The British, drawn by the vast gold reserves and Ashanti wealth, began testing the strength of the empire. They demanded trade advantages. They sent envoys to question Ashanti authority. They sought to control the stool. And that, more than anything, was an insult the Ashanti would never allow. In 1900, a British governor dared to ask that the golden stool be brought to him, not to sit on it, but merely to view it. The Ashanti court was shocked. It was more than disrespect, it was blasphemy. The response came not from a king, but a queen. Santawa, the queen mother of Ajisu, rose and thundered, "If the men of Ashanti will not fight, then we the women will." She led the War of the Golden Stool, a defiant last stand to protect the sacred symbol of Ashanti identity. Though the British eventually overwhelmed the rebellion, they never found the real stool. It was hidden by the people, buried, protected, and passed down through silence. Today, the Ashanti people live on, modern yet proud. The golden stool remains enshrined in Kumasi, still revered, still untouched. A symbol of resistance, unity, and the undying soul of a people who once carved out an empire with iron, fire, and gold. And so, the tale ends where it began, with a stool that no man can sit upon, because it was never built for men. It was built for the gods, for the spirits, and for the soul of a nation that refuses to fade.